Time for a smackdown. This time we're looking at these premium tablets. We've got the iPad Pro versus the Galaxy Tab S9 Ultra. Who will win? Let's find out. Hello, my name is Brad and I review tech for creative professionals. And both of these devices are fantastic. They're just great, but we have to find out which one's better, right? Those are the rules. I don't make them, I just follow them. So speaking of those rules, let's go over the totally unfair, biased rules that we have today. There are 5 categories. Each category has a winner, and whoever wins the most categories is declared the winningest winner of all time. Boom! Nobody can argue with that, especially not in the comments. That never happens. People aren't gonna yell at me this time. They're not gonna yell at me this time. Category 1, we're talking about displays. The iPad Pro comes in 2 sizes. You have an 11-inch and a 12.9-inch. The Tab S9 comes in 3 sizes. The 11, the 12.4-inch, and the 14.6-inch Ultra. These also have different aspect ratios. You have a 16:10 aspect ratio, which is similar to what you might see on a TV screen when we're talking about the Tab S9. And the iPads have a 4:3 aspect ratio. The S8 screens are Super AMOLED displays, and I think these look fantastic. The blacks are super dark, and the colors really pop. This year, even the smallest S9 got a screen update to one of those Super AMOLED displays. It's also worth noting that these displays are running at 120 Hz, which gives you really nice, smooth animations. The larger iPad Pro has what Apple calls a liquid Retina XDR display. The 11-inch iPad has something similar, it just has a liquid Retina display. It doesn't have the XDR at the end, so it doesn't look quite as good. It doesn't have the same HDR poppiness to the screen. But in general, I think both of these screens still look very good, and both of these screens still are running at 120 Hz. Now, while all these displays look fantastic, I'm gonna go ahead here and give the edge to Samsung. Coming in, even at their low-end 11-inch S9, they're still putting in a Super AMOLED display this year, and that is a class move and a fantastic upgrade for anyone who just wants to get in at that entry level. And of course, offering that big 14-inch model is a flex for sure. So Samsung gets it. Next up, let's talk about the hardware. On the outside of these tablets, you see a lot of things in common. They have these squared off edges. They have this finished brushed aluminum. They even come in different colors. The iPad Pro has one of the best processors that you're gonna find in any iPad. We're talking about the M2 processor. And the Tab S9s have the latest gen Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processors. Now, if we're looking at benchmarks, the M2 ends up beating out the Snapdragon, but what I think is important here to know is that any app that you can run on either the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store is gonna run ridiculously well on these devices. And there's just not a lot of stuff out there that's really gonna push these. I guess what I'm saying is performance isn't as big a deal in the tablet world as maybe it is in the PC world. Now, Apple gives you more storage configurations for each of their devices. They're starting at 120 gigabytes, going all the way up to 2 terabytes. Samsung's also starting at 128 gigabytes, but they're only going up to 1 terabyte, and that is reserved only for their Ultra model. If you go with the 11-inch, you can only go up to 256 gigabytes of storage. But, and this is a big deal, Samsung lets you pop in your own micro SD card into the tablet. So you can kind of get as much storage as you want. And if you run out, you pop out the card and you get another one, and you're good to go, and you're not spending an arm and a leg to do that. This is a tough one, and I think I'm gonna say that this is a tie. Oh man, the rules say it can't be a tie. Okay. I'm gonna go to Samsung again here, because for me, storage and being able to expand it is more important than horsepower. All right, our next category is drawing. So finally, we are in my wheelhouse. If you're not into drawing on these tablets, you are really missing out. That's what they are crazy good at. Like, seriously. And if you're someone who's always wanted to try your hand at drawing on a device like this and wants to learn more, good news. I have 2 newer courses just for you. The first is Learn How to Draw in 60 Days, and the second is Intro to Digital Art. When I was teaching myself how to draw, one of the things that I was running into was I was taking tutorials online, and it seemed like I was missing like the first 2 or 3 steps before that artist started in on their work. What I realized is those tutorials were fantastic, but they were starting at this like like intermediate or pro level, and I really needed to start at like this beginner level. And that's where my course comes in. It is designed for beginners to fill in those gaps and teach you the basics so that you can then go on and do some of those more complicated tutorials and courses that you find online. Anyway, there are links to my website down below in the description where you can find some discount codes, and also there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so if you're not happy, just let me know and I'll refund you. Anyway, done with the promotion. Let's get back to the video. All right, where were we? Drawing pens. The iPad Pro has the Apple Pencil. The S9 has the S Pen. Both are really good. All the things that I look for in a good stylus, these have. We've got nice smooth lines. We've got a really nice pressure curve, a good initial activation rate. Neither have much lag if you're drawing with them. Both pens are checking every box for me. The Apple Pencil is a battery-powered stylus, so it does need to rest along the side of your iPad from time to time in order to charge, but it can go for hours between charges, and when you do need a charge, just slapping it on top for a few minutes is gonna get you up to 15, 20, 30% pretty quickly. The S Pen, on the other hand, also charges. It charges along the back, but there's something cool about it. Those things that it needs power for are just some extra Bluetooth features, like you can use the buttons on the pen to take a photo from a distance and that sort of thing. For actual drawing, it doesn't need the battery. So if your battery ever runs out or you forgot to, slap the pencil along the back overnight, that's fine. You can keep drawing and everything keeps working perfectly. Now, when we're talking about the charging position, I think I prefer where Apple's is located. Resting the pen along the back is just a little bit less convenient. Now, the good news here is you can also take the S Pen and there's some magnets along the top. You can rest it there. They're not like really strong magnets. I would not put this in your bag with the pen resting along the top of it. But if you just need to rest it there for a minute while you get up to go get a drink or something, you're fine. What about the cost? Now, the Apple Pencil is $130 extra. Now, the S Pen is just packed into the box. And in terms of price, that is a huge difference. There are some other differences too. For example, the S Pen is a lot lighter. In fact, it's almost a little bit too light. The Apple Pencil does feel better weighted to me. It also has a wider tip. The S Pen has a very, very narrow, small tip. And I think that wider tip gives you more surface area covered with the pencil and just gives it a little bit more control while you're drawing on the screen. Getting the S Pen for free is really, really nice, but in this round, I'm gonna go with the Apple Pencil instead. At the end of the day, I just prefer the drawing experience, so it's gonna win. Next up, we're talking about operating system. We're taking iPad OS and we're putting it up against Android. There was a time where iOS just ran circles around Android. It was just so much better animated and just like did so much more, and there were so many more apps. But in the last 5, 6, 7 years, Android has pretty much closed that gap, and they're very, very close together in terms of quality. And in some ways, Android is bringing newer features into their phones and tablets years before Apple does. Also, since Android is kind of sort of open source, it lets people like Samsung build on top of that. One of the things Samsung has built on top of that, which is a really cool feature, is something called DeX, which basically takes your tablet and puts it into like a desktop mode. Now, DeX is not perfect because many of the apps are designed to work with a touch interface. When you start using a mouse and start moving around, especially the drawing apps, they don't work so well. But if you're doing desktop-y things, email, typing things, creating documents, DeX is really nice. I feel like over the last several years, Apple has been trying to figure out a way to make the iPad more laptop-y without making it feel like a laptop. And in that way, they're really trying to reinvent the wheel. For example, last year we saw Stage Manager, which at first looked really, really cool. But once I got my hands on it and started using it, I realized, I don't really like this. Now, on the good side, a few years back, Apple separated iPadOS from iOS. And what that has done is that has led to better apps. For example, a lot of apps that you read on, whether you're using Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, all of those are they're not good. They're great on an Android phone, but what's happening is on these big Android tablets, especially that Galaxy Tab Ultra, it takes those apps and it blows them up and scales them across the entire interface. One, it's hard to read text along that big of a surface, and also when there's any photos in those apps, those photos take up more than the space of the screen. It's just not a good experience, and it doesn't seem like anybody is designing apps specifically for the Android tablet experience. So the apps that do scale well, like watching a video on YouTube, are great. Drawing apps where it just makes your drawing space bigger and better, that's fantastic. But a lot of other apps, the experience isn't so good. I'm gonna go ahead and say Samsung this time around, just because when they've tried to make their tablet feel more like a desktop, they're not reinventing the wheel. They're just like, let's create a desktop. Let's do what people are used to and have seen before and understand, whereas Apple is trying to do something totally new and kind of misses the mark on both. Next up, we're gonna talk about apps, and since I'm an illustrator, I'm gonna be talking mostly about drawing apps. Now, both of these ecosystems have gotten better over time. Apple got a head start with apps like Procreate, Affinity Photo, Affinity Designer, coming into their own really powerful pro-level apps that are also a lot of fun to use. Android has also dramatically improved over the last several years. For example, you have Clip Studio Paint now. You have Krita now. Apps like High Paint just came onto the device. You have Infinite Painter. But some of those apps, actually most of those apps, with the exception of Krita, are available on the iPad too. Now, personally, for me, I use a lot of Adobe's apps when I'm on the desktop, whether it's Photoshop, Illustrator. I use Premiere Pro to cut up all these videos, Adobe Animate. Because I'm in that Adobe ecosystem, apps like Adobe Fresco are really appealing to me. And unfortunately, Fresco just isn't available on Android. There's also apps like Photoshop and Illustrator that are available for iOS, although those are stripped down versions of the apps, and I don't think they've been quite as well received by the community in general, so I don't know if those really count as a plus, even though they're not available on Android. So for me, it just seems like more of the pro-level apps are coming to the iPad, whether we're talking about Procreate, the Affinity Suite, or even like Final Cut Pro, the video editing app. All right, so let's tally up the votes. We've got 2 for iPad and 3 for the Galaxy Tab S9. Congratulations, Galaxy! This is one of those things that could go either way, and I think every year it kind of bounces back and forth. Right now, I've just been really impressed with what Samsung has been doing. The Galaxy Tab S9 Ultra is so cool, partially because the screen looks so beautiful. I think the drawing apps have come a long way. I've been using Clip Studio so much over the last few weeks and been loving their new Simple mode. I made a video on that a few weeks ago. The iPad feels like the same iPad we had 3 or 4 years ago. There's nothing wrong with that. They did a great job making an iPad. But with every iteration of the iPad, it just feels like, hey, we put a new processor in it. Okay, you can get more storage now. I'm not saying it isn't making progress. It just feels like there's more energy going in Samsung's way over the last few years. But what do you think? Let me know down below in the comments. Thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you in a couple of days.